Psychoanalysis and homeopathy. Namaste. Every pathy has its own perspective on an approach to psychopathology, and homeopathy navigates in the arena with a distinct foundation and approach. Since psychoanalysis and homeopathy both engage with psychopathology, it is interesting to explore the confluence. Disclaimer here: none of us is in conversation is an expert on homeopathy, but guide in discussion with Dr. Himanshu Vaidya. Namaste, sir.
Namaste.
So we start with basics of homeopathy since most of our audience is innocent of the area.
I think it will be a good point to start. I am also half innocent, if not fully innocent. Homeopathy is a pathy, meaning it's a method of healing. So when we fall sick, we go to a doctor, and the doctor gives us medicine, and every doctor practices some particular method of healing, be it allopathy, Ayurveda, homeopathy, Unani, or something else. So just as allopathy is one particular pathy, one particular way of looking at the human system, looking at sickness, looking at healing. Similarly, there are alternative ways of looking at the same thing. So Ayurveda is another pathy, Unani another pathy, and homeopathy is another pathy. So homeopathy is a way of understanding human health and healing the sickness. So that way homeopathy is a pathy, one of the options we have. And homeopathy looks at the human system in a very distinct way. Homeopathy evolved thanks to Dr. Samuel Hahnemann, who was an allopathic doctor and who wanted to have a pathy which was more deep, long-lasting, gentle, and painless. In his time, the allopathic procedures were very difficult, very painful, and the understanding of the human system naturally was limited. So the cure, the method of cure itself was very difficult, very painful. And often there were relapses. And for many sicknesses, there was no cure, and the control itself was very damaging. So he was looking out for a good approach to healing, which would be long-lasting, which would be gentle, which would be affordable to everybody, which would be easy to administer and painless as far as possible, and which would treat the sickness at its roots, never to relapse again. But for a long time, he continued as an allopath because there was no alternative with him. One day, as the folklore goes, he read in the newspaper on one page that a particular bark of a tree, Cincinnati bark, if you consume that, it was written in one news item on one page, it produces fever. And on another page, it was written, it heals fever. And he was confused as to how it can be. So obviously he tried it on himself and he found it was creating the symptoms which was mentioned. But he could not see how it could cure. So he went to that place where people used to consume the same substance to cure it, the same symptoms. So he found that they were taking the substance in a very small dosage. And this gave him the insight that what in its crude form, as available in nature, naturally, what can produce a symptom, if you take it in highly diluted form, the same thing will cure it. And this laid the foundation of the fundamental principle of homeopathy, like cures like. In Latin, they use this, so there is some statement I don't remember, simila similius curantur, something of that sort. I'm not familiar, I'm not remembering, but in Latin, what it means is similar heals similar, like heals like. And with this insight, he then tried it again and again over oneself. And he found every time he took the crude substance, the symptoms appeared. When he took it in diluted form, the symptoms went away. And then he started doing it for other substances, and different set of symptoms will come up. And if you use in diluted form, the symptoms will go away. And this laid the foundation. So he started then looking for patients. And when he would take something, and whatever symptoms it produces, if a patient came with those same symptoms, he would give the same thing in diluted form, and the patient would get well. So this is how his one-off observation, a study on the sample of one, that is oneself, slowly got him convinced that he was not looking at a one-off incident, but he was looking at some phenomena in nature which is based on some laws of nature that we don't understand. In a fundamental sense, even today we don't understand. But it was clear to him that he had captured a phenomena which was based on some stable laws of nature. And this laid the foundation of homeopathy, that what was done was a healthy person was given a substance in the crude form, and all the symptoms, biological and psychological, were noted. And then when a patient came with the same set of symptoms, he was given the same thing in a diluted form and he would get well. And this slowly went on to what was called proving, that you give a substance to a healthy person and see what symptoms come up. And then match it to the symptoms that a patient brings. And if the symptoms match, then give the same remedy in a diluted form. So this was his first foundation that he laid in terms of insights and practice. And then he went to the second important element, that if you dilute it more, the power is more of the medicine. It acts deeper and sustains for a longer period of time. So there came the idea of the power or the potency, that the more you dilute successively and the more you potentialize, it creates more power, which means there is some property of nature whereby if you take a substance and you do what is called in homeopathy potentialization, it has two components, the dilution and the shaking or banging to increase the power. And the two together, they call it potentialization, which is to create potency or power. And the more you dilute, the more powerful it becomes. So this led to the whole idea of the potency, the power of the, or the scale, what we today call as the C scale, the X scale, or LM scale. So this was the second thing, the whole idea of potency. And then experiments followed where they found that the more the age of the person, the higher potencies work better. Less the age, lower potencies work better. In certain remedies, the mid-range of potencies work better. In certain remedies, only the tincture form or the pure form works better, and so on and so forth. A range of observations. This was second element. The third important element was of miasms, and this is where we can actually connect psychoanalysis in some way to homeopathy. That the healing would proceed and then stop. And he encountered that there was some core of that disease which was not allowing healing to proceed beyond a point. It was a very refractive entity inside. And that he called as miasm. And then he said that whatever constitutional medicine you are giving to the person based upon his mind and body, the miasm has to be treated in between. So in between you give a week or 2 weeks of miasmic medicine and again come back to the constitutional medicine. So that was the third important element. And the fourth was, he came to the insight that many of the sicknesses were psychologically rooted. And like in psychoanalysis, what we call about somatization of affect. So on that principle, both of them are together, homeopathy and psychoanalysis, that the somatization of affect happens. And that produces a range of sicknesses. Not to say that there is no sickness otherwise. Of course, there can be. Walking on the road and you meet a car accident, it's a very physical event. There is no somatization of affect. If your bones are broken, it's a very physical event. But if you have a frozen shoulder, where the X-ray shows nothing wrong, but the shoulder is frozen, it definitely has a somatizing aspect to it. So this was the fourth element of him. And the fifth element that he found was of noting down that you take down the physical symptoms and the mental symptoms both of a patient and try to match it with the physical and mental symptoms produced by the substance. That if a substance was given in its pure form, crude form, to a healthy person, what physical and psychological symptoms it would produce. So that was where the remedy selection happened. And he proved a number of remedies. And he cured a number of so-called incurable conditions, incurable by allopathy standards. And then after him, others followed, and they proved even more remedies. And today, new remedies get proved every month, every year. And we have a long range of remedies. Now, the core here is this, that Hahnemann had the basic idea that disease fundamentally happens because of disturbance of the vital force. And the vital force was a force, according to him, which was the cause and the maintainer of life and health of the person. And somehow there was a derangement, in his words, derangement of the vital force. And all that the medicine has to do is to undo this derangement and restore the health of the vital force. And therefore, the last insight, which is very important, is that homeopathy, unlike allopathy, is not symptom-driven medicine. It's a system-driven medicine. Like it's more like Ayurveda on this particular point, that it is not symptom-driven but system-driven. And in one aspect, it's unlike Ayurveda. I'll come to it in a moment. Say, for example, let us say a patient has headache, migraine, and he has, let's say the patient has migraine, he has arthritis, and he has extreme dryness of skin. And he may also have, let's say, mania. Now, if you go to allopathy, you will be sent to 3-4 different doctors. For mania, you go to psychiatrist. For severe migraine, you go to neurologist. For arthritis, you go to orthopedics. And each of them will give their own medications, and all of them have to be taken. It's a very symptom-driven pathy, that for every symptom, you have a pill, a separate pill. And the pill addresses only that symptom. But let us say the same patient goes to Ayurveda practitioner. He will first look at what is deranged in the body. Is it Vat, Pitta or Kapha? So he will look at the thing from a systemic point of view, not from an individual symptom point of view. So when he finds that all of them are manifestations of a disturbed Vata principle, he will advise a diet and a range of medications and some treatment procedures to bring Vata into balance. It's very systematic. It's a very systemic approach rather than a symptomatic approach. So on this point, homeopathy is more like Ayurveda, that it believes that a single remedy will heal all the problems, because all problems arise essentially from derangement of one vital force. And here we have two links with other disciplines. Unlike Ayurveda, homeopathy brings everything out by the principle of similar. It is not healing something by opposing it. allopathy and Ayurveda both are on one principle. They work on the principle of opposites. Whereas homeopathy works on the principle of similars. So in the healing process, in homeopathy, you will see a temporary aggravation of something as everything that is repressed is brought up. And the same thing we see also in psychotherapy, that things get worse for a short time before they get better forever. There is a healing aggravation. In fact, in Ayurveda also it's there.
Yeah.
Although they use the principle of opposites, the healing process is still the same.
I'm still not very clear with allopathy. I've seen there is a lot of opposition to the symptoms and the whatever the symptoms are being shown. How in Ayurveda you say that they also work on opposition?
Just say, for example, if you have a problem of excess kapha, they will give increasing diet and with increasing medication.
Oh,
They will advise you to go more for pepper longum, black pepper, and things of that type, which will be powdered into something, and that will be given to you in some form.
basically they're going to aggravate and
No, they
so
are
that the body stops.
no, they are balancing. They are looking at homeostasis. They are looking at homeostasis by consumption of certain substance. Now in homeopathy, because
So
we are not
basically,
using
it is just and every individual body is going to have his own journey of home creating a homeostasis or a equilibrium. So that is how the dosage varies from person to person.
dosage also varies and the substances used also vary. I'm referring to Ayurveda. Both of them.
Yes, yes.
Like two people have a cough excess, what is given to them and in what dosage and what is prescribed as a diet will vary. But the principle essentially is by opposing what is increasing, by balancing it. It's balancing by opposition. If cough goes up, you take more pitta driven elements. If pitta goes up, you take more cough driven elements. But in homeopathy, we see that instead of that balancing by opposition, it's a very different way of healing. That you are looking at a more subtle element than gross material, and you are looking at the vital force. And this is what makes homeopathy more philosophical in a way, more mystical in a way. One way to look at homeopathy is it's 40% mind, 40% body, and 20% philosophy. Uh, so where were so now
Opposition.
so when we're talking of we'll come to it, the vital force. The vital force is almost like the life instinct of Freud. And anything that opposes the vital force, Henneman has not given a name, a distinct name to that force. So there is a life-sustaining, health-giving force, but there is no life-destroying, health-destroying force defined by Henneman in that sense. But in Freudian terms, we call it the death instinct. And that death instinct might give rise to miasms from a Freudian point of view. We'll come to it how psychologically we can look at miasms in a different way, but the Freudian interpretation will be its outcome of the death instinct. So, and then the core of the homeopathy today becomes this, that we don't know, nobody knows how the medication actually acts. And the day we know, it will revolutionize completely our understanding of physiology, biology, medicine, and everything. But what we know for sure is it works for certain. And it is not placebo as the pharma lobby would like us to believe. So the core here then becomes the finding of the remedy. So when homeopathy fails, it is not the medicine which fails, but the doctor which fails. That is because the right medication in the right potency and dosage could not be found. The triangle for healing is very important. The remedy, the potency, and the dosage. And this prescription triangle is what is the most difficult. And in this triangle, The most difficult part is the finding of the remedy. The potency and the dosage is not as difficult as finding the remedy is. And this is where the whole game in homeopathy is, how to find the right remedy. Because it's difficult to get a new remedy proved, but that is not as difficult as finding the right remedy in difficult cases. So one way to work at it is ki you just look at the physical symptoms and give something. The physical symptom-based homeopathy. Some people practice this. Some people take just the mental symptoms and prescribe. Some people take both and prescribe. Some people take another method and prescribe. Some people use the booklet kind of thing that you give all the information just as we give a case history, and then you go into details and find the remedy. Some people, there are different ways of different schools there. But the core is this, that the most important part there is to find the right remedy. And often people leave homeopathy because they don't get results, or they get unnecessary aggravation because the right remedy is not found. And there are various methods of finding the right remedy. So this is the core, and I think this is where you can take help from psychology and psychoanalysis. And as we go into a more deeper discussion, I'll bring it out how it can be done. So this is how homeopathy has evolved. Today it is practiced in many countries. In the eastern part of India, especially in Bengal, it's very popular, getting more popular by the day across India. And we can see by how costly it is today that in certain parts of country it has almost become a rich man's medicine, which actually should be the poor man's medicine. And that is because of the rising preference, demand for homeopathy. So this is how we can short in very, very
Most
concise
of the
way.
most of the people are switching to homeopathy due to the side effects created by allopathic treatments and medications.
Correct.
People think that homeopathy is much safer as an option for a treatment.
Correct. Correct.
So when we talk about the remedy, so coming to the remedy selection, are there contemporary approaches different from the classical approach?
Yes, the classical approach was that when a patient comes, you note down his case history, you note down his physical buildup, his mental buildup, and the symptoms he presents, the physical symptoms and the mental symptoms. And based upon it, you open the materia medica, the repertory, and you find out which remedy's picture matches this, meaning which remedy given to a healthy individual will produce the same symptoms. And the same does not mean exact match. It's similar. Same is not the word. Similar is the word. So
closest.
So if 70-75% of the symptoms match, you can try out that remedy. So this was the classical method, that you look at the repertory and you find out that which remedy to give. Or if you have 2 or 3 closest, you try one. Does not work, you try second, and it works in some way or the other. And this is one way, the classical way it was this. Then people started looking at, can there be a different way of giving the same thing? So some people started focusing only on the physical symptoms, some only on mental symptoms. Some started looking at dreams. Some started looking at classifying people into kingdoms like mineral kingdom, animal kingdom, plant kingdom.
Okay.
And then take those insights to choose a remedy. And some people even went to the nature of the substance. For example, there is a plant which we call touch me not. So if you take that plant, a small substance of that plant, and keep diluting and potentializing and make a homeopathic remedy out of it, a person who is very, very sensitive, very delicate, and who has been hurt and who has adopted touch me not posture, he comes with a difficulty. That remedy will work on that person. Now what we are doing is we are looking at the source substance, and we are looking at the characteristics of the source substance, the way we feel are the characteristics of the source substance as a human being. and using that knowledge to prescribe a remedy. And then some people look at the sensations, that what do you feel when the difficulty happens? Describe the difficulty, and then describe each element of the difficulty and go on describing till you exhaust the description. And from that you find a remedy. So there are different ways, and one way is, as Dr. Shankaran says, look at it from 4 different windows, and then from 4 sides you see the same remedy, it is the right remedy. Which means you look at it from the repertory, you look at it from sensation method, you look at it from the classification method, you look at it from the genus method, and everything goes to the same thing. So this is one way of
Sensation is same to which we refer in psychotherapy. Sensation is the effect in the physiological form.
Partly, but the way homeopathy uses 2 words, sensation and delusion, are different from the way psychiatry uses these 2 words. And they are
Okay.
different from the way philosophy uses these words. And they are different from the way often psychoanalysis uses these words.
Oh,
So these words are very context driven.
Driven.
They derive their meaning more from their use rather than from their intrinsic nature. So the word of sensation is quite extensive the way they use. It is not Immanuel Kant's sensation that the stimulus falls and the stimulus is recognized and converts into a sensation. That definition of sensation is not used here. Because
not even beyond alpha and beta particles.
not
Not
even
even
that. Not even that. Not even that. It's a very distinct use of the word in a specific sense of it. So it is more like what all you feel in the body. It's a
more
sum
of a
total of
physiological sensation.
both. Physiological also, psychological also.
For example, if somebody describes as for anxiety that I feel butterflies in my stomach rising upwards and then the whole body feels limp, is this the kind of sensation they are referring here?
Yeah,
Or something more?
correct. We would go in details. Like when you say rising in the body like a butterfly, what does it mean? So you would expand
Is it
on.
exhilarating? Yeah, is it exhilarating or it is actually you feel drained? So
Yeah.
more of
So
expansion.
if exhilarating, then do you feel expanding it outwards,
Mm.
or do you just
Mm.
feel moving upwards?
Yeah, so it's the fountain of some exhilaration which you're feeling. Rather, it is a shutting down mechanism where you feel the life force. It's just moved out and you're just shutting down. Okay, so
Yeah. And then
more elaborative sensation.
what else accompanies it? Okay, are we looking at energy rising? Definitely, for sure. But are we
Yeah.
looking at rising energy, which is pleasant, which is exhilaration, or is it accompanied by anxiety and it's a fragmentation anxiety movement?
Fragmentation anxiety.
Because in both cases, there is a rise of energy and high energy. One is energy plus anxiety is fragmentation anxiety. Energy plus something pleasant is exhilaration.
True.
So they
The
would
very
go
sad
into
part
this.
is that not all humans in today's context is trained to even understand their own sensations in the body due to the
That is
lack
correct.
of training in the early years by parents.
That is correct. That is
Can be
correct.
tricky for doctors to explore.
So maybe all methods are not possible to use on everybody with the same efficacy,
Right.
but uh, the toolkit is there. So these are the various ways in which are used for remedy selection. And one more way is that of periodic table, that
Mm.
people have mapped out that if you take one by one substances of periodic table in a diluted
Periodic table is that chemistry periodic table you're
chemistry,
talking about elemental?
yeah, all the
Okay.
elements which are listed there,
Fascinating.
right? In my time, it used to be 105 or 108. I think it's expanded now. So that is used. So what they have done is they have uh, potentialized each of the substances. Some healthy person has taken it and found out what symptoms it creates physically and mentally. And they have noted down. And what is interesting it is that if you go with the periodic table in diluted form, what in potentialized diluted form, what it creates in you is something systematic. It is not haphazard.
Okay.
Like if you take
Very
a row
fascinating.
or if you take a column of the periodic table, there is something common across the row and across the column. And that is something very
Nature
interesting.
is way too smart
Yeah,
in
which means
in its
we are
elemental
looking,
existence.
correct, which means we are looking at some grand design. We don't understand how it
Yeah.
operates, but we are looking at some grand design. We get the uh, a small teaser of the grand design in this fact that something systematic is found there. We not be
Which is very
able,
close to what fundamental model of heat you have created. It is
correct,
very close to that elemental, what would I say, the designing of the system.
correct. And this is where the heat system that I have created can link up with this system, because the heat system is a psychological elemental system, and this is a more physical elemental system which creates those elemental psychological, so to say, entities.
Entities.
So
Absolutely.
the psychological system which is elemental driven, and the uh, more physical and biological system which is again elemental driven here.
More of a constitution. More of a constitution.
So it would be very interesting to do a compare contrast and see how the two can be combined, if at all they can be combined. But this is a very popular method of finding the remedy. The and it's very important because since you have a pattern in the row and pattern in the column,
Columns.
those patterns homeopaths understand in a particular way. And the metaphor they have chosen to understand this is that of a child in the fetus and slowly coming out, and the placenta getting separated and the child becoming independent and going out into the world. This metaphor is what they have used to understand the periodic table by and large. My idea is that psychologically, if you look at the same phenomena, you don't have to go intrauterine.
Mhm.
You can look at the child outside of the womb and use psychoanalytic theories to describe the same periodic table and all the things it produces in a different way. And that is something very interesting to explore, that how psychoanalytically we would look at each column and each row. And we'll come to that in a moment. But it's very interesting how psychoanalytic concepts can be used to describe what the periodic table creates in a homeopathic sense.
It would also address to many of the Ayurvedic formulas used, even to that and extent, even allopathy, because it's all the chemicals in the elemental form. They will have a lot of overlaps of the remedies from
Correct.
all the modalities of pathies.
Correct. In fact, in some of the Ayurvedic formulations, unknowingly they may be using a homeopathic method.
Because when silver bhasma, gold bhasma, then
Correct.
calcium, phosphorus they're using, so it is very close to the elemental forms of
So
the
when they use a very
food.
small substance or small quantity of some substance and make it undergo the bhasma manufacturing process, and in the end of it,
Right.
it remains in a very micro form. We
Mhm.
never know whether the action is actually Ayurvedic or homeopathic.
Homeopathic.
We may be creating a homeopathic medicine through an Ayurvedic method, and we may be using other Ayurvedic substances as carriers in some other form to take that thing
Exactly.
into the location, whatever way it works. We don't know how it works, but that may be one of the case of using something in extremely small amounts, like
Yes.
gold bhasma they,
Nanoparticles.
yeah, metallic bhasma they use, gold or mercury the way they use in very small amounts.
Mhm.
So we don't know what is at work, but it's worth exploring if that is at work. That are we looking at creating a homeopathic action through an Ayurvedic manufacturing process?
And vice versa.
Yeah. It happens because let us say a remedy is a Vat remedy and
Mhm.
homeopathy heals it. So in some way it has healed Vat. Now the way of healing Vat is by restoring the vital force. But the fact that the symptom has gone and the Vat has been healed, that is beyond doubt. So whatever is in the body, whatever is deranged, is getting healed by every pathy in some way or the other.
That also brings in the fact that not every individual will respond to Ayurveda, not every individual will respond to homeopathy, because constitutionally their body might be responding in different way.
Correct. And not even all the sicknesses may respond similarly. My personal
Absolutely.
experience is that uh, in my own case and in the case of many other people around me, homeopathy is very good for psychosomatic conditions, but doesn't produce very good results for lifestyle diseases. And
Okay.
this is where uh, one has to look at it. The second problem is of aggravation. That
Hmm.
personally, I have been to very good homeopaths, but I have not seen aggravation understood or managed in a good way, especially for
In
very
that case, how? Okay.
sensitive bodies. Sorry,
In that case, when there is a viral load, during COVID times, also many people were just, they kept on trying homeopathy. Whereas for general cold and flu, people go, it aggravates, it's clear your system. It's very much aggravating the system. You just keep on clearing your cough, and then it just becomes fine and comfortable. While in the other viral infections, homeopathy does work, but then I'm just wondering, because if it is to do with these elements, how it is going to work on the viral load on the body, bacterial and viral loads.
uh, we'll be back to the fundamental principle of homeopathy as it stands today. That we know it works, we don't know how it works. Because doctors have healed hundreds and thousands of times viral things using homeopathy. But if you ask them,
Exactly.
what did you do? How did it work? Sorry, they would not be able to give an account of how it works.
I think probably it is to do with uh, the body of human or the animal, who's, even in that case plants को भी homeopathy दे रहे हैं आजकल
Correct.
treatments I've
There is
heard.
a there is
So
a
that
agro
means it is
application and there is a veterinary application, both.
right, right. So that means it is somewhere to do with the life force, which you mentioned, that it somehow just increases the life force to that an extent where the body can fix itself.
Correct. So this brings us to also the concept of should you approach some problem in the living system in a generic way or in a specific way.
Mm.
This is also a question in this area of psychology. That every problem in one way can be described as saying it is because of frustration of desire, what Gautam Buddha said. But if I go to a schizophrenic and say all of this is because of frustration of desire, you work on the generic desire frustration. Can he be healed? Now that mostly the answer is no, that we have to go specific and not generic. But in many ways, generics also work in Ayurveda and homeopathy. So this question remains open. Probably we'll have to keep it open in our lifetime. Someday we'll get more insights into what is better, the generic or the specific in this given context. We are nearing time for this session. We'll have to take up the other questions in the second part.
See you all in part 2 of this interesting series. Namaskar.
Namaste.